Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here with our outdoor water conservation presentation. Tonight, we have a water resource specialist and CSU Extension regional staff member, Joel Schneekloth. He has joined us here today to discuss outdoor watering best practices and conservation methods to help Wellington residents conserve water outside. Joel is responsible for the development of research and demonstration projects related to water quantity and quality issues that are attributable to agricultural and urban water use. He helps develop educational programming to help magnify these water issues to the public, and he also collaborates with Nebraska and Kansas about regional water issues. With that, I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you. I guess I got a small audience here.
It's small but mighty.
But mighty. So how many people we have online?
4.
4. So, oops.
Got it.
So my name is Joel Schneekloth. I come from Akron, Colorado. Most of my work is agriculture related, but water management is water management. Whether you're growing a crop for feed or growing a grass on your lawn, water management is still the same as a plant and how it responds. So we're going to talk a little bit here, and I want you 4 people there, I want you to answer this question, because we're talking about outdoor water conservation, why that's more important than indoor to a great extent. How many toilet flushes does it take to equal 1 inch of water savings over 1,000 square feet of lawn?
You can answer in the question and answer slot.
Give you a few seconds here. Any answers yet?
80.
80? Am I on mute now? No.
No.
Oh, because I see the mute signal up there. 80? Try 389. Using today's standard toilet, which is 1.6 gallon per flush. So you can cut out 1 toilet flush a day for a whole year, and that won't equal the savings of 1,000 square feet in 1 inch. And now how many yards are 1,000 square feet of lawn? Not very many. It's only a 30-foot by 30-foot area, roughly, a little bit bigger than that. Now, another one is, how about saving showers? How many showers is equal to that same savings?
25.
Ooh, they're not too far off. 36. So you can't take, one person in your household cannot take a shower for an entire month to save that amount of water. And if you have a 5,000 square foot, 5-person home, nobody takes a shower for the entire month.
Let's not do that.
So that's why we talk about this and water conservation, because it's an important aspect. And the outdoor is much more water intense than what many people think. So issues with Colorado, why we have water issues. Colorado is a semi-arid climate. Evapotranspiration, or ET is what we always call it, plant water use or potential plant water use is greater than precipitation. Now, I'll go to agricultural crops like corn. That uses about 25, 26 inches a year. And our precipitation is, depending upon where you're at, Greeley's about 12 inches. Wellington's probably close to 15 precipitation. We're 16 and a half out where I'm at, 120 miles east of here. So we have to supplement to have maximum yield. Grass is the same thing. It uses slightly more water than what we get for natural precipitation. So we're dependent upon a lot on snowpack depending upon where you're at. In the Front Range, it is almost all snowpack in this area. And snowpack can be highly variable. I know, anybody remember 2002? I know, because that was, 2003 was a low snowpack year, both years. The joke in 2002 was the headwaters of the South Platte was at the Denver Water Municipal Treatment Facility, because there was no water above that. And that was on national news. I remember seeing that. And I knew who was standing there talking about it. So Colorado is also a headwater state. Headwater state means all water flows out, no water flows in. We don't gain any water from any neighboring state. There's only one other state in the United States that is a headwater state as well. And I bet you most people never guess it. It's Hawaii. All other states have water flowing in it. And being part of a headwater state, we have compacts. And hopefully everybody's heard of the Colorado River and the major complications with that river system, because they've been in a drought for over 20 years. Lake Mead, Lake Powell are now at 30-some, low 30% capacities, projected to drop another 50 feet before next year. They're already dropped over 150 feet from full. So that's the major compact, but South Platte is also in a compact with Nebraska. It's one of the more less aggressive compacts, but we still have a compact that we have to meet. We have to deliver so much water to Nebraska every year in the South Platte. And it doesn't say in a drought year or a wet year, it doesn't matter. So that's one of the complications we have. We have 9 compacts in the state of Colorado that we have to comply with, and water deliveries to downstream states. So the next thing, current population in Colorado is 5.7 million. Growth is a major consideration. We keep talking about how are we going to meet the water needs in the next 30 years. 30 years is a blink of an eye. But by 2050, population in Colorado is projected to be 8.7 million people. And where are most of those 3 million going to live? Along the I-25 corridor. Most of it's projected between Pueblo and the Wyoming state line, which is just north of here. So look out, we have more water use coming and more municipal needs. Where's that water going to come from? A lot of the water needs have come from purchase of agricultural rights, but we also want to grow our food. So there's that catch-22. Also, as we're buying those, we're buying closer to the front range water rights and converting those over to municipal. But as time goes on to meet the next 3 million growth, we're going to go further and further away from the front range. And now we're going to start talking pipelines to maneuver that water around. And also then a secondary application is the impacts to small communities as they dry up. One community is not very far away from here, none. Lost a significant portion of their irrigated acres through a municipal transfer. And we're seeing in other ones. Go to the Arkansas Basin, Crowley County lost a significant portion of their water rights to a municipal transfer with Aurora. Industry in that county is non-existent. So we have to look at that, maintaining those type of communities as well. So we have those. What about West Slope? And that's where we talked about the Colorado River. There's a lot of West Slope water that comes over to eastern Colorado. So, but West Slope is now having their issues. That picture on the right there, that's Lake Mead, the bathtub ring picture. That is right there, I believe that's 150 foot of elevation drop from when it was full. And it's projected to keep dropping. How long can we keep diverting West Slope water is the question. Next one is climate change. The impacts of climate change. Are we going to become drier? Less frequent precipitation? More erratic precipitation? So those are the things we have to look at. And erratic precipitation means we want storage to maintain, have those high precipitation events. We want storage to hold that water. So we don't want it flowing out of Nebraska in excess of our compact. So outdoor water use is about 50% of the total household use, typically. That's why we talk about the outdoor, because indoor, much of that's not really consumed. It goes to the wastewater treatment facility. And if you really had to do it, and you had the option of doing it, say it was West Slope diversions, you could keep reusing that water, reusing it. I know Denver and the other front range cities have always talked about toilet to tap. Doesn't sound very appealing, but it's clean water. But there is larger potential for savings in outdoor usage, like we showed earlier. So we're going to talk about the grass, the outdoor. Grass is our major consumer of water in a household, outdoor usage. Weather is a big factor. Time of year changes that water use because of the weather. Springs are cooler, generally wetter. Falls go cooler. Summers are hot, but very highly variable. Irrigation sprinklers. Uniformity is the key. When we try to design irrigation systems in agricultural sections, we want to have every square foot have the same exact amount throughout the field. That's an impossibility, but you want to get as close as you can to it. Other ones that drive me nuts is you go drive by, you see the concrete getting wet. The driveway's wet from the sprinkler system because they don't know, they aren't managing that sprinkler system. They aren't looking at the issues that are going on. Lawn management, things that you can do as a homeowner. Types of grass, what variety, what species. They change with water use. How you cut it. What about fertilization? Fertilization does impact water use. The 3 R's of water management, what we always talk to, everybody that we talk to, whether it's homeowners, agriculture users, the 3 R's, right place, right time, right amount. The right place, you want to put that water right where you need it. You don't want to put it on the concrete because the concrete doesn't use water. We don't want to put it in the ditch. We don't want to put it past the curb. We don't want to water the house. Unless you really need to wash the house badly, I guess. The right time. Does the grass need that water? Does it have adequate water? Does that crop have adequate water? That's the timing aspect. If you put it there, nothing good happens because if we get a heavy rain, that water will leach out, and also you'll have water running off your lawn potentially as well, depending upon how fast it comes. The right amount. We don't want to put more water on than that crop uses or that grass uses, because it potentially could be a waste, depending upon what happens. If the grass uses a 1/2 inch, that's all we want to replace, a 1/2 inch. We don't want to put 3/4 inch. We don't want to put an inch on per irrigation when it's only using a 1/2 inch. So the weather is the big factor. Temperature, solar radiation, wind, humidity, precipitation are all factors that go into predicting how much water that plant uses. And we have ways of calculating that. The nice thing here in Wellington, just down the road, you have a weather station run by COAGMET, Colorado State University, and they have a way of getting that data up online. If we have time, we'll go through that quick. Time of the year. The above factors generally increase through the summer, then decrease as we go into fall on most of those. The temperature, the humidity all go up, or temperature goes down, solar radiation goes down, so water use goes down as we go from summer to fall. Spring is our low water use time period as well. And we're going to show this, grass water use by year. Now this is the last 4-year average. You can see springtime low, summertime high, and fall drops off again from there. Doesn't get as low as spring. But variability should show one thing, it's not a constant day to day. It jumps up and down depending upon whether you have the wind speeds, the temperatures, you have cloud cover that day. All those things factor into this. So you can't say, well, I need to put a 1/2 inch on every 3 days or an inch on every 3 days. You got to look at what the weather's done. Sometimes it might be a 1/2 inch a day you need. Sometimes you don't need any more because you got a good rain. Sometimes you might need an inch. Sometimes you might need 2/10 of an inch. So you have to look at that and not just constantly irrigating the lawn the same way you do every week. So 2019, you can see even more variability compared to the average. 2018, or this is 2019, excuse me. Less, even more variable, but even lower water use depending upon what time of the year you're at. Early, late May, we see a low water use time period. Was that mid-July, June? We see a low water use time period when we expect to be starting to see high water usage for grass. Again, 2018, 2017, you see the variability that we have for water use, and that's what we drive at. You just cannot say, I need a 1/2 inch every week, or an inch every week, or an 1.5 inches every week. It depends upon the weather, what you have, and you need to adjust with that. Now, water use is that factor, but we also have to factor in precipitation. Precipitation's free. You don't pay for that. So take advantage of it. Now, what you'll see there is there's that line going across where we're sitting at 0. So anything above that means the plants are the soil's losing water. Anything below that line means the soil's gaining water. We're storing water. That's what we always talk to producers about in irrigation, storing water to use later, but making sure we store the right amount and not over applying. So you can see here on average, or in 2020, we had a few days early, and 2020 was one of our driest years on record, number 5 in our area. I can't remember what was up in this area, but it was up there as well. So we see most days all summer long, we're using water anywhere from 1/10 to 2/10, almost about 2/10 of an inch per day on grass. Look at 2019. Look at all the times, periods when we're below that 0. We're actually gaining soil moisture. We don't need to be irrigating our grass during those time periods. And 2018, even more days and even bigger amounts during that time period. And again in 2017, we're seeing that there are time periods when we don't have to be irrigating or watering our lawns. Now go back to this weather data. Like I said, CoAgMet. It's online. It's a free service to you. You pay, as a taxpayer, you have free access to this. And we utilize it in agriculture quite a bit, depending upon what we're growing. Locations down at Ardeck, there is also another one in the city of Fort Collins, right on campus. That is, I believe, the oldest weather station in the state. Akron has number 4. Number 3 or number 4 oldest weather stations in the state. So you can go online, look up that weather data, and find out how much water, actually compute how much water needs the grass is needing or used. So how often to water depends upon time of the year. Springtime, maybe once a week. That's our low water use time period. If you put 1 inch on, that'll last a week, at least a week or close to it. We have this precipitation events. Take those into account. You may not need to apply 1 inch. You may have had a 1/2 inch of rain during the week, so take that into account. You only need to apply 1/2 inch if the grass used 1 inch. Summertime, twice per week, because the soil bank is only so much, but it will last 4 to 5 days at most, but time periods it can't last 7, especially on shallow root crops like grass. Fall, we go back down to that once a week time period again. Water less often, but water deeply. And why do you want to water deeply and less often? You want to promote that root growth. You want that deep soil, deep root structure in your lawns. It helps with drought stress later on in the year, because that plant can access, if the water's down there, the plant can access that water and utilize it more efficiently. If there's no root there, the plant can't use it. Sprinkler systems, they make life a lot easier than, the old days of hose dragging, when everybody had to water the lawns. They moved sprinklers from here to there and all that, and they did it less frequently, but more, but they generally put more water on per time. But sprinkler systems is a much easier system. You set the system, you don't have to worry about it too much, but there is a problem with those. The old Ronco commercials, set it and forget it. You talk to homeowners around in different cities and ask them, how often do you check your sprinkler system? How often do you reset your sprinkler program? What? I can do that? My lawn guy just comes and turns it on for me. So you adjust for the time of the year. Once, twice a week, different length, time periods, how long that sprinkler system runs to put that water on. There's all things that you need to be looking at and read the manual. There is a manual somewhere, or go look up online. There should be a manual for it. Learn how to use it, because it is a tool to use. Are the sprinkler heads working correctly as they should? I know cities promote irrigating at night. Where are you at night? Inside the house, either watching TV or having fun with the family, or you're in bed. A lot of times people say, well, I set my sprinklers to come on at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, do you want to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning once in a while to go check the sprinkler heads and make sure they're working right? So I always say, you check them once, at least once a month, maybe every other month, and run it a quick cycle through during the day and check those sprinkler heads. Make sure they're popping up correctly. Make sure they're not spraying the concrete and not getting areas. Make sure they're not plugged. Make sure they're actually there is a nozzle within that sprinkler because occasionally they do pop out and you have a geyser going there. It's pretty in Las Vegas, but it's not necessarily what you want in the lawn. Uniformity, like I said, the design that you want is every square foot or every square inch gets the same amount of water. But it's difficult to do that with sprinkler systems. You'll come up with dry spots. And how do you handle those dry spots is key. Well, here we go. Here's the sprinkler system. And it has all sorts of things on it. You want to mouse over to it where I talk here? You know, it has all these settings here, like auto settings, and that's where most people are going to be at, up on top. You also have date and times, run times that you have there. And then the other one is the water days. You're going to set, because you can water here twice a week, depending upon where you live. So you'll be using it. But look at that very bottom, weather sensors. Is it raining? How many times do you drive around the town in a rainstorm and you see sprinklers running? You need to be running. The other one, seasonal adjustment, just a little bit to the left of that. That's that spring to summer time period. I don't need to water as often or water as much. During the spring, or if I get a cool time period, I can reset that. There's also, this one doesn't have it on there, but there are other sensors, soil moisture sensors. So if that soil moisture sensor says the moisture is adequate, you don't need to irrigate, it will bypass that zone or shut off completely and bypass the entire irrigation. Work done back, it's been over 20 years ago now when they started developing these things. Work by a university out of Utah, they found they could save 20% to 30% of water. But when they were managing it, when they were using it, but when they put it into homeowners' hands and tried to document it, the water savings was down to 5%. And what they found was homeowners were fiddling with the system because they weren't liking the results. It wasn't quite green enough, but it was green enough in reality. So watering per time, do you really need to shut that sprinkler off? Just hit it off. It rained last night. I got an inch of rain last night. I was supposed to water tonight. Flick it to off. Bypass it. That's the easiest one that you can do. So, there's a lot of innovations. I talked about these rainfall sensors, shutting off the system, soil moisture sensors. That's all that we work with. And they work with that agriculture. I know producers back in the 90s that started utilizing these things. They said, well, why do I want my sprinkler running when it's raining and I got a ½ an inch or 3/4 of an inch? So there's technology that tells them they got enough rain, shut the system down, or it automatically shuts the system down. We use soil moisture sensors in irrigation scheduling in agriculture to try to be efficient, try to be economic on our irrigation scheduling. Are your sprinkler heads working correctly? This is what I said. It takes a visual observation. If you wait till the morning, you can't tell what's happened unless your whole front yard is underwater or your whole driveway is now clean because of your sprinkler system. So you're supposed to run them at night for the highest efficiency, which is good. It's also generally the time of the day when we have our least wind, which will affect that sprinkler system, the uniformity. However, you want to run it, like I said, want to run it during the daytime occasionally. Check those sprinklers. Are they working right? Are they plugged? Are they not aligned right? Because mowers will knock those things around and move them. And take one along the edge of a concrete. If it adjusts 5 degrees, that's a lot of water going on the concrete in an area that's not getting water now. So uniformity but you'll always have dry spots because it's very difficult to make a round sprinkler into a square area, irrigate uniformly. So how do you do that? How do you manage that? Most people, fortunately nobody's here. Well, I could pick on you. No, but most people, how do you manage those dry spots? Well, I'll adjust my watering time up. So what you're doing is covering up uniformity problems by over irrigating water now. And there's complications with that as well. Those areas that were nice and green are getting too much water. Your brown dry spots are now getting the right amount of water. So this is that catch-20. So you're wasting water in the wet spots to adequately irrigate, so you don't have that dry spot. What we always say is occasionally dragging a hose is not a bad idea. Now, like we were talking earlier, is it potable? Is it non-potable? If you have non-potable water supply, put a spigot onto your non-potable water supply and utilize that to irrigate your lawn or irrigate those dry spots. Drag a hose and do that once a week is all you really have to do there to supplement those. Now this goes back to the irrigation and the uniformity. Here's 4 sprinkler heads. That area in between, that white spot, is a nice dry area. Now we want to overlap those sprinklers, so we bring it in here and we now overlap it in this direction, but we see we still have dry spots. And we have areas that are getting more water, such as that those darker greens are getting twice the amount of water that the blue area is getting. The light green is getting the same amount as that light blue, but we still have white patches. So we add more sprinklers, but we still can't correct that problem. We're still going to have some uniformity issues, no matter what. But those areas are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it all goes back into that system of how your sprinklers are working, how well that system is designed. This is where we go to a audit. Fort Collins has done an audit program for a number of years. It sounds like Wellington is looking into getting it some done by Northern, which is a good program. It gives you actual numbers to say, is my system working right? What do I need to do to that system? So you buy these little rain gauges. Put the 2 to 3 in that dry area, those dry areas. Put some all scattered all out throughout the yard. You'll tell how much water you're getting on the nice looking yard, part of the yard, and how much water you're getting in the dry spots. Now, in reality, what you want to look at, there shouldn't be a bigger difference than 20% between those two areas, or the average versus the low. That's a well-designed sprinkler system. If it's 50% difference, the average of your dry spots is 50% lower than the average that you're putting on the entire yard, it's probably time to redo the sprinkler system economically. So this is what a can test or a uniformity test would look like. But you can see on this yard, like I made the joke, is there's dry spots in there. But we're finding out those dry spots and what we can do with those dry spots with our irrigation system, our lawn sprinklers. This is a design engineer's nightmare. We like square fields. Sprinkler systems like square. These nice patterns, they're appealing to the eye, but they are a nightmare to try to water. If you do sprinklers, one side's going to be right square, straight, no matter what, and you have this curved area going out. So you're going to be either watering rocks or you're not going to be watering the lawn adequately. So those are the design considerations that you have. Utilizing a uniformity test will tell you a lot of things. Like I said, the difference in amounts between the wet spots and the dry spots, how much you're overwatering those wet spots, how much more water you really need to apply to those dry spots. If the difference isn't great between those two, you can adjust that sprinkler up a little bit to cover up those dry spots then. But if they're big enough, that's where I say, drag the hose out, hand water those dry spots, or figure out what's wrong with the system, your sprinkler system. You can fix it. You can't fix anything if you don't know what's wrong. You can overlook it, turn the blind eye to it, adjust, but you're causing more complications. There is one other problem with overwatering your lawn. It's called diseases. Root rots and stuff like that will happen over time. You know, those dry spots. How much of the yard is it? It's a large area. Look at the sprinkler system. You probably have issues with that. There's a poorly designed system. And I have seen those before, no matter what. There's a simple problem. One sprinkler's not popping up right, or one sprinkler is not, like the rotators, is not rotating correctly. So you want to look at that, and that's why you run those systems, run this, find out where those problems are areas at, run the sprinkler during the day, and you'll be able to diagnose problems. Small areas, just drag the hose out once a week, water those little dry areas, get rid of them, and go from there. You know where those dry areas are at all times. So just keep ahead of that. Because if you increase the timing, you're now overwatering the rest of the yard. Large water, overspray on the concrete. Yeah, it's a large water waster. Concrete does not use water. You're not going to grow concrete. It will not grow. It will not change colors. It will not get healthier with more water on it. But it's easy to fix if it's straight lines. Just adjust the sprinklers. Run the sprinklers during the day. Look at it, and maybe those sprinkler heads may be cocked a little bit. Lawnmowers are notorious when you run over them, they move the sprinkler heads. You know, incorrect sprinklers, fine sprays. You don't really want a fine spray, especially in Colorado where we have wind. If you live in perfectly calm conditions all the time, yeah, fine sprays will work, but you want larger water droplets. They're more wind resistant to movement. The type of grass, how you cut that grass, and fertilization are also key things on cutting your water use. You know, everyone dreams of that Kentucky bluegrass lawn, dark, deep green, you know, have the kids running around in it, but it's a high water use grass. That deep, dark green is a high water use. And we live in a semi-arid climate, limited water. Potentially, you know, it's somewhat renewable by snowpack, but it's a highly variable water supply. And from that aspect, that's reservoir storage that's helping us out. You know, population growth. These water supplies are going to get stretched more and more as people move into Colorado. And it's not just necessarily people moving in. All the studies show that half of that population growth of 3 million is going to come from people's kids staying in Colorado. And that's what you want. You don't want your kids moving out of the state. You want to stay, they want them to stay relatively close. That's about half of the 3 million population growth. Drought. We always go through drought. We're always just one rainstorm away from a drought. Always, it's the state climatologists always say. And climate change again. What's going to happen there into the future? My biggest concern with climate change is what's happening on the west slope. Is that going to be a continual effect, get worse over time? And then the water transfers like Colorado Big Thompson, all those other water transfers that come from the west slope are going to get impacted in time. That's going to reduce our water availability over time. Cutting height. You know, that has a big impact. The taller the grass, the better. That will cut your water use rather than just cutting it fine and short like a golf course. Do you want a golf course lawn or do you want a nice, healthy lawn? Typically, we say 3 to 4 inches is where you want to cut that grass at for optimum. Don't want it too tall because you don't want to run through a jungle, but you don't want it too short where it looks like a golf course. Now, it increases rooting depth. That's the big thing. The shorter you cut that grass, the more stress you put on that grass, the more that's going to impact the root zone. And that roots are what's your working engine that pulls the water out of the soil and pulls it, sends it through the leaf. You know, like I said, the above ground area is the engine for the plants, and the soil moisture is the reservoir that you have to use. If there's nothing in the reservoir, it's like running a car out of gas. Nothing's going to be there. You're not going to grow anything. So the deeper system will also tolerate dry periods, droughts during the summer. That hot period's better with that deeper rooting system. Now this is from a grazing study, but it relates back to mowing, because a mower is your grazer. It's your cow out there. Just that far left picture over there, never grazed. Look at that root system. The next picture was a one-time removal of 90% of the grass above, but then it left it alone. You see a fair amount. Now the other one is a 50% removal every 3 days, and that still has a very good, healthy root system. But then you look to the right, 90% removal every 3 days drastically reduces the root density, rooting amount within that lawn, within that grass. And that's the same thing what you'll see by mowing a short grass, mowing it often, and keeping it look nice. Now here's another one, nitrogen. How many, let's see a show of numbers, say yes, no. How many of you do a fertilization program just like what they say they advertise, 4 times a year? Spring, early summer, late summer, fall. Mixed?
Yeah.
Okay. If you follow those programs with 4 applications per year, you're putting out 4 pounds of nitrogen per 100,000 square feet. That comes up to about 170 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Now, farmers growing corn, How much nitrogen do they put on an acre of corn? Any guesses? More, less,
More.
more? But how much more? A lot more?
I would imagine a lot more.
That's typical what we see out there. 170, 220 pounds. So an irrigated lawn is putting on just about as much nitrogen as most of our irrigated corn farms. Now, there are guys that put on more, but there are people that put on less. But that 50-pound range there, 170 to 220, probably catches 80% of the irrigated producers. Why is that? When you're farming 1,000 irrigated acres, you're putting out nitrogen at that rate at 30 to 50 cents a pound, it affects their pocketbook. They don't want to put out too much, but they want to put out enough. Now you're doing a 5,000 square foot yard. That's the problem, economics. It's not as big of a hit on your pocketbook as what agricultural producers do. That the look of that lawn does not impact your pocketbook, your income source. Now, are you mulching or are you bagging your grass? That impacts how much nitrogen you really should be putting down. You know, if you're bagging your grass, you're removing all the nutrients. The nitrogen goes up into the leaves, and if you bag that grass, send it off to the landfill, or use it somewhere else, you're removing that nitrogen that you just applied. So you're gonna have to put more nitrogen down to meet those needs. If you're mulching, you're recycling your nutrients. You're putting, mulch that grass, it goes back on there, microbes break it down, all the nutrients that were in those leaves get broken down, put back in the soil, brought back up by the plant. So you don't need to keep putting on nitrogen on top of nitrogen on top of nitrogen.
Yep.
Generally, what I was doing on my lawn, before I decided I wanted to go to low water use grass, because I don't have time and I don't like mowing too much anymore, I'm going to buffalo grass. I don't have kids running around on the yard either. But one time a year, I put max, one application, about 1 pound per 1,000 square foot. In the spring, I was done. But I left all the grass clippings on the lawn. I never bagged them.
If you mulch your lawn, do you need to thatch your lawn more?
More likely, I would probably say aerate your yard. Because what will happen there, thatch is one thing, the clippings are another. Thatching is more of the root system that we're seeing. Aerating that yard brings up dirt, puts it on top, and the microbes go nuts then. They'll break that down. An aerating yard is actually a good thing too as well. And we'll talk about that because it opens up, gets air into that lawn, that plant can breathe, water goes in easier. That's why, we talk about what we can do in agriculture to improve infiltration. We leave all our residues on the surface as much as possible, or we till it the right way to increase that infiltration rate. So why am I concerned about the nitrogen? It's the same reason why people talk about in agriculture that they're polluting water potentially with their sources of nitrogen, either through runoff or deep percolation. Well, now you're putting on that same amount of nitrogen on your yard, overwatering that yard, you're leaching nitrogen down into the groundwater, or it's running off into the systems. And we talk about algae growth in lakes. A lot of that's nitrogen and some of it's phosphorus. And a lot of it's phosphorus as well. The eutrophication, am I pronouncing that right, of lakes. You want to go swimming in a bunch of algae. Do fish like a lot of algae? Not necessarily, because it can starve the oxygen when it dies. Like I said, it's a water quality. And that's you're overwatering those certain areas because you're trying to prevent those dry spots when you could have easily managed the dry spots with a hose. Or go out, get somebody brought out, do an audit, find out what the problems are with your system, and you may have to do a complete revamp of your irrigation system. Because, put it this way, they don't last forever. I've talked to one person, they said, well, I put my lawn sprinkler in 30 years ago. It's probably about 20 years past its prime. We talked to irrigators. Well, I put this system in for 25 years ago. I haven't done a thing to it. I said, well, you probably should be doing something because one of the things in industry when you're cutting materials, what's one of the best cutting agents? Water mixed with sand. That will cut through steel like butter. A water jet, water cutting system. Nitrogen is extremely. The other one, we talked about compaction. We talked to two here. They bought new houses and new subdivisions. I'm sorry to say, but they have compaction issues in their yards. All that running of equipment over the top of your yard, contractors do not go back out and deep rip your yard before they put your lawn in. There's a lot of compaction there. You have to adjust for that and try to get rid of it. Typical aeration systems only go 2 to 3 inches. Products, I know there are people out there, and if somebody gets mad at me, that's okay. There's claims of certain products. We'll eliminate compaction. There's no data that shows that happens. The only way to get rid of compaction is aeration or tillage. You want to deep rip your yard, like we do in agriculture at times when we have a lot of compaction. It'd be really lumpy. Try to drive your lawnmower over top of it. You'd lose fillings, one, and it wouldn't be very fun for the kids to play on. So the compaction is, if it's deep, my very first house I bought, it was an older house, but it had one spot that never looked good. Now this is a tool we use in irrigation scheduling, water management. It's a soil sampler. And I use it to push into the ground, check the soil moisture by hand. I don't use a lot for scheduling anymore with our new technology, but I use it to find out what's problems within the field. Is there compaction in that area? Is it a dry area? Is there something wrong with the sprinkler? Or is it just soils? Well, my first yard, my wife called me nuts because I went home and every night I'd probably spend about 20 minutes plugging my one spot in that yard down to a foot and a half because I knew it had a compacted zone. And after finishing it, yeah, I'm sorry to say, but yeah, the dirt looks like little doggy turdies all over, but they disappear after 1 or 2 waterings or raking it or mowing it. But that grass just perked right up. Saw no difference in the rest of the yard. So you can do this, but if you got an underground sprinkler system, know where your hoses are at. And also know where your cable lines are at if they're buried cable. That can get expensive. They claim they bury them 2 feet deep. No, they're more like about 3 to 6 inches at most. And this is also one way of looking at, do I have moisture down there? Is my dry spot a dry spot as well? Or is there something else going on in that spot? Just don't blame it on the sprinkler system. Preliminarily, we need to find out if there's something other problems with it. So we got about 45 minutes, questions and economics. Lawns are difficult. What dollar value to put on pride? That's the question we always talk about. With agriculture, we put dollars to the board. How much do you value your lawn? It's a pride thing. I got the best looking lawn in the neighborhood. What value is that? It's a lot on pride, but what from an economic situation? Agriculture, water use, yield per inch. We know that. We know how to manage it. We don't want to put too much water on because we have that leaching of the nitrogen. We have waterlogged soils, which are not good for plants as well. And it's economics. We want maximum economic yield. And that's what the producers in agriculture are trying to do with their water, with their nitrogen, with everything they do. Maximize the return and minimize the inputs. Because inputs get more and more expensive every year. When you grow an irrigated cornfield, you got $700 an acre sitting there. Maybe more. Depending on where you're at. We want to limit the water left at the end of the year. And when that last irrigation, we don't want to water right up till the grass goes dormant, do we? We can let it go dormant a little bit earlier. That's another water savings aspect. And with that, I'll take any questions over the internet.
Got the first one. So what do you suggest in the amount of time you water your lawn the 2 days a week?
That's going to vary by your sprinkler system. How big are the nozzles? How closely is it? Now, when you Put your sprinkler system in. Whoever installed it should have gave you a sheet by run times. How many minutes to put this amount of water on, how much water time to put this water on. If you don't have that sheet, do the rain cans, do the rain gauges. That'll give you an idea. I don't know how much water you put on it right now, how long you run it, but run it for that set amount of time and go back and look at those rain gauges. So if you don't have the data sheet, that's the simple way to figure it out.
Follow-up question to that. That website that you mentioned, does that show you how many inches you should be putting on at a certain time?
It'll show you water use
Okay.
by day. And actually, can we go to that website?
Okay.
I'm off camera. I can hide now. Okay. So what we're looking at here is you see station data selector, but I want to look at crop water use. So click onto that one. So we'll set up the time here. Let's see, 2021. Today's date is July 29th, I believe. I never can keep track anymore.
You got it. It's 29th.
29. And I want to look at the last week's water use. So sit there. The number of days to do, end date, start date is what you want to look at. So I want to look at end date. I want to look at, so today is the end date. I want to look at the previous 7 days. So we go to look at, here's Fort, this one sounds better. Fort Collins, or we can look at, there's other Fort Collins, AERC, that's the horticulture farm, I believe. RDEC is the closer one. We'll look at RDEC. Put all those in, scroll down. Oops, don't want to scroll there. Now, see all these crops in here? We don't want all those. I just want cool season turf. So I come in back in here, select none, hit cool season turf. Again, scroll down here, hit submit. And it tells me what the water use, well, it gives me 6 days now because it hasn't calculated for today yet. But on average, turf used 2,300s, 2,200s. So for the total of those 6 days, 1.31 inches. And if you look to the far right over here, it does give you precipitation for that site. But precipitation can vary quite a bit from site to site. So you want to have a rain gauge around your house, actually. I've seen it where I get nothing. My neighbor, quarter mile away, got 3/4 of an inch. The rainfall can be that variable. So, but this gives you a good idea of how much water that you need to put on in a week over the time period. So let's go back here and actually change the date, start date, and we'll go back up here and go back. Instead of the 29th, we'll go to yesterday because the 29th hasn't been computed yet.
Sure we got the CSU Index selected.
We'll find out here. Oh, wait, wow, this thing is touchy. I'm used to my mouse. CSU RDEC. Go back down here. Hit the submit. So 1.34 inches. Yeah, we evidently had Fruta on there, West Slope. So we can see how much water we're using in Fruta. But again, here, 17, 16. So the last 7 days, 1.34 inches. So if you're doing twice a week, you would probably want to split that about in half because we've had no rain over the last 7 days. And we're somewhat not projected really to get much rain anyway here in the next 7 days. So 7/10 of an inch each time you irrigate would be a good amount. I wouldn't put anything less than 7/10 of an inch on per irrigation because of efficiencies. The water that's held onto the plant is at a fixed amount and doesn't really change unless you have no grass. So 7 to 8 tenths, but then you have to factor in the efficiency. And like I said, your systems are X% efficient, and that you can do by dialing up or down a little bit over time to see really what's going on. I would say most systems are probably 80% efficient on a good system, 85% efficient. So add on 10 to 15% water onto that. So an inch 34, you'd be looking at close to an inch and a half over the week. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah, but I can ask again if not. The next question is, does watering during the daytime on super hot days help your lawn?
Yes and no.
We gotta stand at the podium.
Oh, I gotta go get back in camera view. People don't want to see my mug. Okay, we're back. Does watering on a super hot day help it? Yes and no. It gives it a little bit of cooling, but that's a very limited time period of cooling. But it's also efficiency. You want more of that water down in the root zone to pull that plant, so that plant can pull it up. That's why they say irrigate at night. The amount of evaporation is not that as much as what some people say. I've heard claims of 30–40% evaporation if you irrigate during the daytime. That's physically impossible to evaporate that kind of amount of water, unless you're putting on 1/10 of an inch. Yeah, then you can evaporate that amount of water. But if you're putting on 3/4 of an inch to an inch, the evaporation is a small percentage. But efficiency-wise and wind-wise, it's better to do it at night than it is during the day.
Okay, the next one is, how do you know if you're watering your lawn too much?
If it's mud all the way down to China, you're watering too much.
What if you don't have one of those tools?
Pick one.
You can buy one. If you're watering too much, you'll see issues with the lawn. It'll look pale because it doesn't have the nitrogen. You're leaching nitrogen. You're also creating anaerobic conditions in that soil. It's not getting the oxygen it needs. So the grass isn't pulling that water up efficiently. It also feels mushy at times if you're watering. But the best way and easiest way is something like this. They make smaller versions of this. You really don't need it very often, but like I said, for me, it's a nice little tool to aerate my yard and take out my frustrations and save a few dollars on it, renting an aerator.
That's a good transition to the next question. What is the best time of year to aerate, and does it matter if you use a machine or do it by hand?
Machine's going to be faster. Generally, if you don't have compaction issues, that's all you really need to do. If you have major compaction issues, this is a little better tool because it goes deeper. Then once you get that compaction out of there, then the roots can grow deeper. Because once that slot will fill back in with soil, the plants will follow that little slot because it's a nice, easy way to get roots down as well. So best time to aerate, generally spring. Some people say fall as well, but I say spring is probably the better. And also that's a good time when you aerate, overseed your lawn. Put a little bit of fertilizer down. That's also generally when your wettest time period of the year, and it's the coolest because you are actually somewhat injuring that grass a little bit because it's a cutting tool, jabbing down there and ripping roots apart.
Great. Any other questions?
Okay, I'll give you everybody. I know why I was brought up here because of costs. Oh, let me pick this up first, and then I can use it as cane.
Will you use the podium microphone? Seems like that one's going in and out.
Oh, I'll put that there. I'll use the podium now. One of the things, I live in the country, so I maintain my own irrigation well. I maintain my own septic system. So I cover all the costs. With a municipal, yes, the cost is getting high. It's going up, but there's a service there. Like my my well that delivers water to the house and the yard when I do irrigate. If that pump goes out, I'll tell you this, the last time I replaced it was 7 years ago. Lightning strike took it out. $2,700 for one-time replacement. This is my third pump because lightning, well, twice with lightning, and once the pump was actually old and worn out. So it's not cheap. And I'm covering those each time. Like I said, $2,700, and you said Wellington now is $60, $66. It takes me almost 4 years to pay for that at $66 a month. That doesn't count the electricity I use to pump, and it doesn't cover my septic system as well. So, and my septic system, just maintenance on it is every 3 years I pump it, and it costs me about $500 every 3 years just to pump it. So yes, everybody thinks that I get off easy, but there are costs with breakdowns. And I have to, and if something goes wrong with the well, I'm the first one out there digging around going like, did I blow a fuse? Did I blow this? Did something happen here? Before I call the well guy to pull it. So there are trade-offs in there. And also the other thing is growth happens. The cost of water is going up tremendously. When I moved here, CBT water, which is what predominantly cities are buying now, there's a little bit left from agriculture to buy, but it's a very good water source because it's renewable or reusable to extinction because it's a west slope diversion. That's why cities like it. When I moved here, it was about $1,500 a share, $1,000 to $1,500 a share. The last time I knew, and that's been several years ago, it was 40-some thousand. I was just notified it's 60-some thousand dollars just for the privilege of owning that water right. And that's not a big water right. It's only about 0.8 of an acre foot on average. If it's full share, I believe it's 1 acre foot, but then normally anywhere up to, I don't believe I've ever heard of 100% delivery. It's normally in that 80, it can be even lower than that. So it's not a guaranteed water supply either.
We just had another question. What are your thoughts on xeriscaping versus efficiently watering grass?
If you like the looks of xeriscaping, do it. I've got part of my area xeriscaped. It's a native grasses. Don't water it. If it turns brown, it turns brown. I wish I could get more. My wife convinced to put more of the flower beds into xeriscaping, but she likes green flowers, flowering flowers all the time. I just don't like watering and weeding. But yeah, xeriscaping is a great way to save water.
Good questions.
I think this is the last chance to ask any questions. So we'll give you a few seconds and then see what we got. Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Joel, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. I think we've all learned a lot, and I look forward to all of our residents being able to watch this on our YouTube channel and continuing this conversation. This was our first ever water conservation program in Wellington, so it's a big thing to celebrate, and we really appreciate you being here.
I know a lot of people we can invite in. They could talk different things.
Awesome. That's what we like to hear. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us virtually, everyone. Have a wonderful night.